It just takes a few killjoys to ruin a good thing, and Jesus has been doing good. By the time we get to Matthew chapter 15, he's been healing the sick, taking care of people, and right about now, they show up. They show up to pour cold water on it, to put out the fire, to submit their complaints to those in charge, to find fault in the faultless. If you've been paying attention to where Jesus has been and what he's been doing, then it's probably not going to surprise you what happens next with the Pharisees and teachers of the law. Here they come. Here they come. Matthew 15. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked him, "Why do your disciples break the traditions of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." If you want to do your own study in Exodus and Leviticus, you can find out how the priests were told to be clean, to wash themselves. If you look through the Old Testament, though, and try to discover on your own what rules should be applied in hand washings to the average person, you're going to be frustrated in your search. So where do these men come from? From Jerusalem. That shows you how much they hate him. And what is their criticism? It's about the traditions of men that have grown to enormous sizes, and now they equate with the laws of God. The people of God, the Jews, had so many generations to pass on these wise sayings from the rabbis to the people and down through the centuries, and here are these men saying they're not doing it right. They see the problem, and the problem is Jesus. It's Jesus' followers, and they come to confront him about them. The sacred traditions of their faith are being trampled upon. And one such example is these disciples who haven't been washing their hands before they eat, and well, you'll see what that really means. I'll tell you that I wash my hands before I eat all the time. I don't like germs. I'm pretty particular on that. I'll usually remind my children when we sit to eat that you need to wash your hands before you eat. Have you done that? And I'll push them to go wash their hands if they haven't. I'm concerned about hygiene for me and for my kids. I don't usually make a stink about it with others, so if I'm eating with you sometime, I won't ask you if you've washed your hands. I'll just eat along with you. But I do notice, though, when people do and don't wash their hands, and I don't want to make people feel badly here. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I may be stepping over a line, but I'll be honest with you. I've said this before. Let's just say I go to a restaurant, one of my favorites, and before I sit down to eat, I go to the bathroom. And I wash my hands in the bathroom, as I always do. And about that time, I see a random man walking out of the stall in the bathroom, knowing what he has done, and you know what he has done. And he stops at the mirror just long enough to check out his hair, but not long enough to wash his hands. And he walks out the door, and I just might in that moment throw up in my mouth. And it takes it to a whole nother level if he then proceeds to put on his apron and head to the kitchen to cook my food. Now I'm bothered. You might say we shouldn't really be talking about bathroom issues in here. It's not appropriate. But I'd like you to hang with me because Jesus is going to bring up somewhat of a bathroom issue. Just to be clear, these leaders of the people are not talking about hygiene. They're not talking about germs. They're talking about ceremonial washing so that they can be right before God, clean in his sight. They've taken the traditions of men, which may be good in themselves, and they've elevated them so that they are just like what God has said. Men may be right and good suggestions, but if they're not the commands of God, they are not equal with what God has said. These religious leaders are supposed to be representing God, but now they find themselves speaking for God, saying things God himself has not even said. And how does Jesus respond? Verse 3, he said, "Why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses their mother or father is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is devoted to God, they're not to honor their father or mother with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition, you hypocrites." See, there was this feeling back then that as long as you did what was right, if you did what was necessary, if you worked along with the traditions of men, almost what you did out there just doesn't even matter. I mean, they wouldn't have said that, but you see how they live and you see it. And Jesus points it out to them. He throws it back at them. If they're concerned about being right, being religious, then they'd better start acting differently. And he gives them a great example. See, God has told everyone to honor your father and mother. It's a big deal to God, and you should do it, especially if you consider yourself part of God's family. But he's pointing out how they haven't been doing this in this instant. They're not taking care of their parents when they're doing this other thing. They've passed over their aging parents, and they're now taking care of their own business, acting like it's God's. Hey, did you know, in all seriousness, it is difficult to care for aging parents? It can be financially difficult. It can be emotionally draining. It can be physically exhausting. It's the truth. But it's the right thing to do, and God expects his people to do it. Let's be honest, it's difficult, but it's good. Dave Ramsey talks about the sandwich generation. Have you ever heard that before? They're the group of middle-aged adults who are trying to care for their aging parents at the same time as caring for their own children still in their house or under their care. And he says there are 11 million Americans in this group trying to balance the cost of a nursing home for mom and dad and also college tuition for their college kids, and it's wearing them out. But just so you know, Jesus isn't talking about this. He's not talking about people who care for their parents, but it's hard. He's talking about hypocrites. He's not challenging people who love their parents and love the Lord and they're doing the best they can. They're just weary from it. He's talking about the folks who want to look good. They want to look religious. They have an air of superiority. They want people to notice how painstakingly they cross every T and dot every I, as we like to say. They want to be right. They just don't really want mom and dad to have that money. So they say, it's promised to God, under oath, Dad and Mom, I can't take it back. They cleverly find a loophole in the tax code, a way to spend money but not give it to mom and dad. It's dedicated, it's sacred, it's holy. What else can I do? They relieve themselves of a responsibility while acting like they're being responsible to God. They use the word, as Mark uses it, Corban at times. It's the gift. They dedicate it to the Lord. Hey, what can I do? Sorry, mom and dad, this is for the Lord. It's not for you. They figure they get away with it until Jesus calls them out on it. You can't neglect the most important things at the heart of God and act like you're okay. It's not okay. Hey, could I remind you too what happened back in chapter 12 among these guys? Jesus got crossways with them on that healing on the Sabbath day with that one guy who needed it. He told them they didn't even know what was most important to God. Go and do a little research, gentlemen, and find out what he means when he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. That's the Lord speaking. He accuses them of caring more about their own sheep that falls into a pen or a pit or a well than a man who needs to be healed on that day. They didn't like it, and it says then the Pharisees went out and plotted how they could kill Jesus. Well, time has passed, but they still hate him, and they long for the day when he will be gone, and they travel all the way from Jerusalem just to confront him again, to get him somehow. He calls them out for hypocrisy. Back then, he does it again today, and their traditions now have allowed them to do what God would never allow. They think it's right. They think they're right, but in God's eyes, they are dead wrong. You can't neglect your parents, hold on to their money, and act like you're doing God a service. Hey, let me talk about traditions real quick too, since that's the context. Traditions aren't bad. I think you know that. We all have traditions. Individuals have traditions. Families have traditions. Nations have traditions. Churches have traditions. We in this church do some things just because we always have. And then there's the laws of God. But when the tradition of man becomes more important than the laws of God, something's wrong. And what's embarrassing is when people don't even see it. McGee tells a story of a guy in his church. He'd gotten paid and he wanted to bring him, the preacher, half of the paycheck to go to God, to the church. The problem was McGee knew this family's man didn't have enough to eat, but the man was insistent, but still, you should have this. The church should have this. McGee loved the man, must have appreciated his faith, but challenged him. No, sir, you need to take care of your family. The man was a little taken back, offended probably. But you can't act religious and escape the responsibility, McGee says, in a pious way. The truth is we can't neglect what God tells us to do and act like it won't matter to God. It comes to your own family. It starts there. 1 Timothy 5, Paul says, Paul the apostle, If you don't take care of your own family, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, you're worse than a pagan, a heathen, an unbeliever. Take care of your own family, or you've denied the faith, he says. Listen to what Jesus says next. Listen to who he quotes. Listen to why they would have been appalled at hearing it. You hypocrites, he says. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are just rules made by humans, merely human rules. Ow! I bet they hated that. And instead of worrying about how they heard it and might be offended by it, Jesus sees it as a teachable moment. So he calls the crowd to him and says, listen, everyone, listen and understand. What goes into someone's mouth doesn't defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them. So you tell me, who's really defiled here? The disciples of Jesus who did not immerse their hands in pure water to pacify the Jewish leaders, or the Jewish leaders who had pure hands and starving parents at home? Sure, they seemed religious, like in Isaiah's days. Listen to their words. It's perfect. Listen to them sing. It's perfect. Listen to them preach. It's perfect. Listen to them pray. It's just perfect. Everything's right and perfect, but their hearts are not even tied to God. Their worship is useless. They are foolish. They're selfish, and they're sowing seeds they will not want to reap. Paul in Galatians 6 from the Living Bible says, don't be misled. Remember, you can't ignore God and get away with it. A man will always reap just the kind of crop he sows. If he sows to please his own wrong desires, he'll be planting seeds of evil, and he will surely reap a harvest of spiritual decay and death. If he plants the good things of the Spirit, he will reap the everlasting life which the Spirit gives. Well, if Jesus wasn't concerned about how they heard it, the disciples sure were. Verse 12, the disciples came to him, Jesus, and asked, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard it? Jesus replied, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them alone. They're blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both fall into the pit. If God didn't plant it, if God has nothing to do with it, at the end he will uproot it and throw it out. The Father will take care of those that are not his, and you don't want to know where they go. Yes, you do. It's not pretty. Jesus has already given several parables, and we've already been over them. It's just surprising the disciples still don't get it. Verse 15, Peter said, but explain the parable to us. Oh, are you still so dull? Jesus asked. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then is eliminated, goes out of the body? There's his bathroom talk. Don't be offended. It's true. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and that's what defiles them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander, and others more. These are what defile a person. Eating with unwashed hands? No, that does not defile them. Jesus is a little bit frustrated with his own disciples, Peter, a lot frustrated with those who are supposed to be leading the people, and he explains it. You know what he's saying, right? You can't wash your hands to be clean and forget your heart that is unclean at its core. You can't live a life of selfishness and sin and expect a God who demands sacrifice and holiness to reward you richly for how you've lived. You can't come to church and act religious while you treat people like trash, refuse to forgive them, curse like a sailor, flaunt your sexuality before men, and enjoy yourself, enjoying the sinful nature and the love of the world. If your heart is full of sin, it doesn't really matter how clean your hands are. You can sing beautiful songs in here, but God knows when your lips are singing, but your heart is stinking. You can be fully present in this place The words are rolling off of your tongue, but your heart and desires are far from Him, wishing you were more like them than like this. A hypocrite is an actor. He plays a part where he's good at something, acting like something he's not. She rehearses a role to play it on the stage to get the applause of the audience that she really admires. Church, I'm not criticizing us. I'm not calling you out as a hypocrite. But if you think you can never be that, a hypocrite, you are in danger of becoming just that. We must be on constant guard to always be genuine and real, honest and sincere, pure in heart and confessional when we're not. Jesus tells them the Father is fully prepared to pull them up, root them out, throw them away. And the warning to us is real. Jesus gives this comical view of a blind guide who says to another blind guy, "Let me show you the way." The blind guy says, "Here, get in my car, I'll drive you down the road." Where do you think they're going to end up? The Pharisees wore the right clothes and ate the right words and ate the right foods and said the right words and performed the right customs and did everything just right, except for one thing: they were wrong. They were the wrong kind of people, so don't be like them, and please don't follow them. They don't know where they're going. He gives a list of sins. It's not exhaustive. I don't know if those Pharisees right there struggled with these or not, but you couldn't tell by looking at them or talking to them, because they would have told you, "We are perfect. We are just right." But if these kinds of sins run rampant in your kind of life, you are wrong. And if you are not right with God, then nothing else that's right matters. If you've heard the popular saying, "What's in the well of the heart comes up in the bucket of the mouth sooner or later," it's true. True index of character are words, Robertson says. Words. They tell on you. What comes out is what is in there already. So what you eat later today, even if you don't wash your hands and I won't like it, it doesn't matter. That probably won't hurt you too much. You might get a little sick, maybe, but you'll be okay. What really shows that your soul is sick is what comes out of your mouth, what is already deep down embedded in your soul, in your heart. So please, let's make sure we are clean on the inside more than the outside. Let's make sure we are pure in heart and sanctified in soul and Christian to the core. Jason Bradley wrote an article in relevantmagazine.com, and it was entitled, "All Christians Are Hypocrites." You may disagree with his title or the content, what he's saying, but he starts with this. It's probably no surprise, he says, that many people associate the word Christian with the word hypocrite. Christians have developed a reputation for saying one thing and doing another. I live in a small town, he says, that excels in Saturday night drunkenness and Sunday morning church attendance. In the news, we're regularly confronted with embezzlements and affairs and abuses of power, and worse, from high-profile Christians. We all have Christians we consider frauds in our lives, and if we're honest, hypocrites stare back at us while we brush our teeth. He'll go on to say churches sometimes reinforce or reward hypocrisy. I'm not saying we do. And he also says behavior monitoring and behavior modifications don't really work. So what he says we must do is be open to correction, be more transparent about our own faults. All sin and fall short of the glory of God, he reminds us. You can read the article for yourself. You can agree or disagree, but I like how he ends it with this one thing. If you really want to end hypocrisy in your own life, if it's there, then this is what he says. The pursuit of Jesus Christ is your true testimony. Everything else is window dressing. The only way we truly beat hypocrisy is by willing to recognize that every single one of us is a spiritual novice. Christianity doesn't make us better, smarter, righter, or happier than anyone else. It realigns us with God and allows Him to begin the messy, mysterious, and often brutalizing work of untangling our twisted lives. the effort we waste on appearing more godly to others and ourselves is wasted. And only the effort poured into pursuing Christ matters. Are you in Christ? Are you pursuing Christ? Nothing else matters. Let's stand and sing. Come if you need to.
I stand to praise you, but I fall on my knees. My spirit